I'm really lucky to have Steve Scaysbrook talk to me again, the Professor Steve Scaysbrook from Birmingham University, and we're going to carry on some of the topics we started talking about in the last episode. So, keep listening. Hey Stephen, it's great to talk to you again. I really loved that last lecture. It was so useful. I learned quite a lot from it. But there was a couple of things that you talked about which really got me thinking. And well, one of the things was this 1906 Mitchell's book, which you said is really good. And it made me think, I think that when you detail a building, that there are certain principles that are long lasting. And so I'm curious as to whether I'm right about that, whether Mitchell's details are still appropriate today. And do we still teach that? It sort of connects with this international language of drawing, I think, as well.
Yeah. Hi, Jonathan. Thanks for inviting me back. It's Mitchell's is there are about three books that I came through college with: Mackay's, Mitchell's, and probably one other. I can't think which one it is now. Oh, Barry's, and those are three books that I came through college with. And I must admit, Mitchell's the one that I used the most, together with Barry. And Barry is a very good book in that he didn't go to the depths of Mitchell, but his drawings were always very well done. They were well drawn, and they were very informative and current for the time of the book. And I got I got the request to look at it, and I already knew the book. And so when the editor at Routledge said, "Would you have a look at it?" and I said, "Yeah, I know the book very well. I'll do something with it." And so I started talking around my other lecturers and other people, and they said, "Yeah, go for it. We'll help you." Like, the big promise never came. I've always had to do it on my own, but to be honest, I quite enjoyed the idea of writing and thinking some of my lectures. And one of them is this idea, this concept that most of the buildings that were built to the Mitchell standard, and don't forget there was no building regs then, it was all local bylaws. And Mitchell's was successful. He'd built around the world. He didn't know it, but he had influenced buildings all over the world in different climates and different weathers. And so when I take my students out into Birmingham dates back to about the 1300s, and there's a river. Most people don't know it because it's hidden away underneath industrial buildings, but down at Digbeth area, which is the heart of old Birmingham, there's the River Ray, and it weaves its way along all the canals and everything else. And to be honest, if you're not told it's there, you wouldn't know it's there. And so I take my students down there and I show them. Now, the best building there is Bird's Custard. Alfred Bird built this building there, and it is a classic Mitchell's building. Well detailed, good quality material, well put together, and it stands the test of time. It's been there since whenever Mitchell built it. When Bird's put it up, I can't remember the date, in the mid 1800s. So it's been there over 100 odd years. And to be honest, it's changed hands a few times. It's now an arts and cultural centre. And in fact, I know there is an architect's practice in there which has done very well for themselves. But the building itself has tested time. It's withstood the weather. Now, whether they understood the weather, I doubt it. Not to the level that we need to now with climate change coming along. But the building has worked and survived 2 world wars, a heap of weather, and it is still working. If you go inside, some of the detail, they use thin mortar joints. If you remember what rubbed bricks are, they're bricks that have been fired soft once, put back and put into shape, and then rubbed to make sure they fit right, and then refired again. And you can see this on the building. The detailing is gorgeous. Right next door to it is the old Free Library, which was done with old bricks, big, thick mortar joints. But it was built to Mitchell standard again, not because of the materials, but because of the detailing and it's still there, and it's older than the Bird's factory, but it still works. Things like that you should understand. Yeah, if you go down to the other side of Digbeth, the old, what I call the old quarter, the old terraced houses are still there, and because they haven't been maintained or anything, the downpipes are old cast iron and they've cracked and they spill water, and you can see these big stain marks down the wall. The mortar's been eaten away. The downpipes, if they're still there, enter, they discharge onto the pavement and go across the pavement into the gutter, which was fine in the old days. And if it had been maintained, it would have worked still these days. But now, old factories in there, the old jewelers, the old, machiners are still in there, still working hard. And I used to go down there. There used to be a vegetarian restaurant down there that we used to go to. Since COVID, it's gone, but it's still there. But the buildings themselves have been not maintained, and so they've still survived because of the quality of the building, but not the way they should have been. If they'd been maintained and looked after, they'd have been absolutely perfect, but they're not.
So is it the quality of the material or the quality of the detailing?
Bit of both. You can have good detailing, but the detailing won't last if the quality of the materials is not very good. And I must admit, you can see older buildings where the bricks have been fired on site, and they differ from day to day. And it's quite easy to see the ones that have been well fired and the ones that haven't, because the ones that haven't have it's called spalding, where the front face comes off. And you can obviously see when the brick's been laid and they put a frog is in a brick. So a frog is the indentation in a brick. And so if the brick has been fired well, it's because the frog is there. So when the contractor, the brickie, comes up and he sees the frog in it, he will then turn frog down. Why? Because he has to if he puts the frog up, he has to fill the frog up with mortar, which is a waste for him. So he'll fill it up. So he'll turn the frog upside down and face down, which means that only the outer rim of the brick has got any load bearing capacity, because there's a hollow inside now. And so the load pushes the face of the brick off, and they often collapse because of that. And so you can see when work has not been done well, or the materials are not well looked after or been manufactured right. And you have to forgive them, because a lot of materials like that in the early 1700s, the late 1600s, it was all done on site. Lime, which was predominantly the material before concrete or cement was invented, is a material that works well. It's very forgiving. But cement is not forgiving. It's rigid, it's hard. And so if the building wants to move around or do things, it doesn't allow it. And so you get big cracks and all sorts of things coming on. So understanding where the materials come from, the way that they were manufactured on site, sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. And if it had been maintained well, they could have done that and protected it. And Mitchell understood this, because in one of his books, it's one of the best explanations of lime I've ever seen. And it's in the 1906 version is very good. There's another one, and I'll for the next, if you ask me to come back, I'll go through this one. But as an architect who's he's not a proper architect, he was given the title, and he rewrote the last big one, the last one before another architect took it over, and there's a whole story on that. But the point is understanding a building, understanding the weather. Mitchell understood it, and he detailed accordingly. Nice little drips. I take my students around and I say, look, feel underneath that sill. And when you do that, all the guys go, I ain't touching that, I say, when you put your hand, you felt this drip underneath. So I say, what's that for? And they've no idea. I said, when water comes down there, where do you think it's going to drop off? So it'll drop off. No, it doesn't. It clings to the underside of the surface until it comes to that drip. And then it has to fall off. It can't go any further. And
it
that's
can't go up.
Yeah. Well, if two pieces of glass come together, like you do on a greenhouse, you'll see there's the slime underneath. And why is that there? Because capillary action lifts and it pumps itself up.
Hmm.
But that's another story. But
So,
it's
so the
teaching the students modern day construction by looking at the old and
but
drawing
those
it.
those physics principles, Stephen, are still appropriate today.
Oh,
Surface tension is
unbelievable.
what you're
Yeah,
talking about.
yeah,
Capillary action, pressure differential.
yeah,
Um, we've got a lot of problem with kinetic energy here because we get very strong winds. 120 kilometers an hour is not unusual here. 150 kilometer an hour winds will blow water up because we use a lot of
yeah,
wrinkly metal. It's nice and shiny and slippery, and the water will get blown up those roofs. And under flashings. So we have
yeah,
to be careful about that stuff. But it struck me when I came to work in England that all of the principles that I learned about detailing, you could just jump into England and start working. And it
yeah,
dawned on me as I was teaching my students that actually these physics principles, in the ways that we deal with detailing, flashings, deflect, drain, uh, uh, dry, and durability, these are what we call the 4Ds of detailing. If you've
yeah,
got water in a cavity, you've got to deflect it. That's the easiest thing to do. Solves, so many problems.
yeah.
But these
There's,
principles consistent around the world.
yeah. If you look at a lot of detailing around the world, some of it is good, some of it's bad. I like Pinterest. If anybody goes onto my Pinterest site, you see what I've saved. Um, I just collect details of things that I look around and see. Loads of old books that you can buy. There's a couple of very good sites now where you can get. There's one called Archive, which is where old books have been PDF'd, and you can get them still. Old copies of bylaws, old drawing books, how to do perspective in and trees and things like that. They're still there, and I collect them like crazy. Um, if I find a good one, I'll even copy the text from the because PDF on there is very good, but EPUB is not. And so I like EPUB. So what I do is I'll collect it, redo the text, and then copy each of the different pictures and put them back in again. Maybe I'll even redraw them, if I'm really interested in it. So
So I think
I Mitchell's has to be said to be one of the best educators that have stood the test of time, and that's important to realize. And I feel honoured that I'm the next in line to re-put his books back up onto the shelves again. It'll be Mitchell's Construction, edited by Steve Scaysbrook, and that's it.
that's something really important, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a legacy that I'm quite keen on doing. But what legacy have I got to leave?
What
Some of
was
my
all those
jobs,
students you've
who would
trained,
know him?
Stephen?
Funny enough, I was waiting for Wendy to come out of a bank the other day, and I was standing outside and looking at this wall, and all of a sudden, I saw this brick at eye level right in front of me, and the architect had put his name on there and the date the building was put up. I had never seen it before, and yet I live in the area for God knows how long, and I thought, what a clever idea. His legacy is now that building, as long as it stands, his practice is there for time. You know, not a lovely building, but it's still there. I love it.
Another question that came up from our last discussion was this transition between draftsman, technician, and architectural technologist. Because when I worked in England, I was a trained architect. I got registered when I was in the UK,
Yeah,
and my job was to design the whole part of that shopping centre in Sutton, and I had to do a whole lot of detailing for that building. And I had 6 people working for me. I had 6 guys on my team, and
yeah.
I used to hand sketch all of the details, and they would draft them. So they would then turn my hand drawn details into ink. And in those days, we were using drawing boards with parallel slides and ink, and they would
Yeah,
ink up all the details. Um, but those were people. It's like in where I live at the moment in New Zealand, the architect wouldn't hand sketch to quite the same level of detail. He would expect the architectural technician to be able to do some of that detailing themselves.
all of it. all of it. The I I worked in various practices, and I must admit, Jim Salt was rather like you. He would say, "This is the sort of," no, he wouldn't detail it. He would say, "This is the sort of detail I was thinking of," and he'd sketch out bits and pieces. And I always kept these sketches. I had a little folder full of them. And in the end, I knew what he wanted because we worked together for so long. And I'd just show him the details. He said, "Oh, yes, what we did at that place," or "Yeah, I remember that one. That worked okay." And so, we had a dialogue. I was the technician, and I loved it. After the time, there was no conversation. You just hand me the job and say, "Get this sorted." I used to do kitchens a lot, and he said, and fire certificates, and he would say, "Right, get this sorted." I know what he meant. Go down the kitchens, see what needed to be done. Oh, and contact the local fire officer to say we want a certificate for this building. And he used to come up and say, "How you getting on?" And I'd show him everything. He said, "Thumbs up," and walk away. That was it. And his report was, because he knew what was going on, to Stan, or who's sadly gone, or Jim himself, who's just died. He just go back to Upton Thames, says, "Oh, it's all under control. This is where it is." And he hadn't done anything, but I knew, he knew, we worked as a team. And there was just me and him, and an interior designer called Paul, who was much the same, carried on.
So it sounds like we understand this kind of similar thing. There's this, we've transitioned from draftsman to technician to the
Yeah.
architectural technician we've got now. And one of the things I'm trying to get across to my students is that when you draw detail, you're still designing.
Oh, yeah.
Because one of the things that comes up, they say to me, "Oh, I've got to put this, they don't know what to call it. So it's the architrave."
Yeah.
Or, the design of that architrave is still part of bringing through the entire design of the building. It has to be appropriate.
As well. Yeah. There's so many times that I've done detailing, and we did a Sikh temple in Birmingham for Brian Bannister. That was the guy's name, Brian Bannister. And Brian had got this Sikh temple, and he was a good architect, good designer, but he couldn't detail to save his life. Sadly, he's gone as well now, and seems to be the thing. But Brian couldn't detail, and he expected me to do it. And he just said, "Preserve my detail, preserve my design. Don't cock it up." And I never did. Every time I come up and I said, "How do you feel about this?" And he would say, "Yeah, but," and I said, "Okay, this is another design." He said, "Yeah, I like that one better." So I always gave him a choice. And I said, "There's one detail, there's another, there's another." He says, "I like this one better." And he said, "Fine, that's the one I'll use." And I refine that detail. Jim Salt used to say, "Refine, refine, and refine again." I don't care what anybody says. If you're thinking about something and you're coming up with something better, that's time well spent. There's too many architects' practices that say, "I want it done by Friday." It's got to be done. No thinking, just draw the damn thing. And I always thought that was wrong. You've got to sit down and think about how the detail is going to work. And there are 6 degrees of a detail: forwards, backwards, left and right, and up and down. And if you don't follow those rules, you're going to get a mistake somewhere. So if a detail like a DPC or a flashing detail at low level, you follow that detail around the building and look at it and see whether there's anything going to interact with it which is going to cause that detail to be altered by somebody on site who's never going to ask the question. And so if you do that, you're going to save yourself an awful lot of trouble. And then you go up and down. Is that wall in the right place? What's going to happen at beams when they come in? Can you cope with that? Is there a flashing detail that needs to be solved? Or is there a window that's going to come in that's going to cause problems or anything? But the moment you follow those 6 degrees of detailing, you're going to solve the bigger problems that somebody else is going to do for you, and often not tell you. They'll just do it and then blame you because you didn't tell them in the first place. Oh, I didn't know
Because a
what
lot
you
of
wanted. I carried on. Couldn't get hold of you. Wow.
when a lot of people start, they think that the detail is everything. They don't think of the detail in 3 dimensions, going,
No.
as you say, left and right. They don't think about the detail going up or coming down, or what it's going to be like as you turn the corner. So they'll detail the head of a window, the jamb of a window, the sill of a window, without thinking how those things all come around and join together and
Yeah.
form your design. And as you
Well,
say, that the
that's there was a. You've used SketchUp like I have, and there's a rule in SketchUp called follow me. So if you draw a line around a building and said put the detail at one end of it, follow that line, the damn thing would just go around the building and just do it. And I used to love that because I could put it into that and I could turn the building around in 3D and watch where the detail's gone without having to think about my 6 degree, my 6 points rule, because I see where it's gone. And it would go and I said, oh, there's a problem. How do I deal with that? Little sketch, round building, and keep on doing that until I'd solved all the problems. So this concept of time, where too many practices have got their only thing is they say don't spend time thinking about it, just do it. Wrong. You've got to detail, think about it, go back to somebody and give them the choices. Sit down at a table and spend 10-15 minutes thinking about the detail with somebody. It's not wrong. If it's wrong, you fix it. And that's what I was talking with somebody yesterday. We're looking at this new KTP, and he said, don't spend too much time doing something. I said, no, I will spend the time thinking about how this, putting this down in words. And I can't remember what he called it, but he basically agreed. It's the way that you build up information, and then you can cherry pick the bits that you need out of that piece of documentation and make it work. And I just, it's something I've always done, and it's been taught to me by some very good architects through the years.
Steve, those are the questions that came up. I tell you what, we're running out of time tonight, but one of the things that would be really good, I think, is for you to look back over your career. And in the last, maybe we can have another interview. In that last interview, what I'd love to hear you talk about is, now that you're looking back, what should we teach our architectural technologists? So I'll give you a while to think about that. Maybe next week we'll get together again and we'll have a discussion on that, if that's okay.
Absolutely. Yeah.
See you later, Stephen. Thank you very much for your time.
That's okay. No problem. Nice to be with you.